Don't look in the window after midnight. Alina rented the house almost by accident, through a little-known agency. It was far from the city, on the edge of a forest. Old, wooden, with large windows and a creaky floor. The owner only asked for one thing: don't open the curtains after midnight, especially in the bedroom. She said it with such strange certainty that Alina almost laughed. She thought the landlady was just superstitious. The house seemed perfect, quiet, surrounded by trees, and most importantly, solitude. After a messy breakup in the chaos of city life, this was exactly what she needed. The first week was peaceful. Alina cleaned, lit candles, adopted a shelter cat she named Miska. Only the floor creaked at night, and for some reason the clocks always glitched after midnight. And then it began. Exactly at 12:17 a.m. on the 8th night, Alina woke up to a sound. Knock, knock, knock. A slow, deliberate knocking on her bedroom window. She thought she was dreaming, fell back asleep. The next night, same thing. And again the next. On the third night, she got up and walked to the window. The forest outside was soaked in mist, but in the reflection of the glass, she thought she saw someone behind her, tall, shadowy with long arms. She turned around sharply, no one. But Miska was hissing under the bed, her back arched like a bow. Alina lay back down, trying to calm her racing heart. The next morning, rummaging through an old cabinet, Alina found a black leather-bound book, moldy with a musty smell, no title, no author. Most pages were filled with strange symbols and scribbles in ink. The last page contained neat handwriting. If you hear 3 knocks, don't look. He doesn't come without reason. He chooses. He won't know you unless you see him. But once you do, he will find you no matter where you go. Below was a stain, reddish-brown, like blood, and a date, 1974. Alina decided to leave the house that day. While packing, her cat disappeared. She called for her, searched everywhere, shook the food bowl. Nothing. She checked the attic, the one place she hadn't explored. It was dark, damp, smelled of rot and ash. Her flashlight revealed scratched up floorboards, as if something had clawed its way toward the far wall. Then she heard it again. The knock. Knock, knock, knock. From the attic window, which was nearly at the roof, and somehow wide open, she ran downstairs, heart pounding. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat with a kitchen knife, staring at the bedroom door. At 12:17, the knock came again, but not from outside, from the mirror in the hallway. Knock, knock, knock. She tried not to look. She tried, but curiosity won. In the mirror, she burned herself, but with empty eye sockets and black liquid trickling from the corners of her mouth. And next to her, him, tall, faceless, arms like spider legs. He stared straight at her. The mirror cracked, and the lights in the house went out. Epilogue. Alina was never seen again. The house remains empty. The agency no longer listed for rent. But every night at 12:17 a.m., neighbors say they still see the light turn on in the upstairs window and hear 3 slow knocks on the glass. If you happen to walk by and accidentally meet the gaze of that window, you'll see someone watching you from the inside, and then you've already chosen him. Anton bought an old rotary phone at a flea market, black, heavy, with a real metal bell. The seller smirked as he handed it over. Interesting thing, sometimes it rings by itself. Probably just bad wiring. Anton placed it on his nightstand as a decoration. He never plugged it in. On the third day, the phone rang. Loud, sharp, piercing. He nearly dropped his mug. He answered, despite the phone not being connected. Silence, then faint static, and then a female voice, low and crackly. "You're home, aren't you?" He slammed the receiver down. That night it rang again. This time he didn't pick up, but the phone kept ringing for 27 minutes. When he finally answered, the voice was closer. "I'm standing by the door. Why didn't you open it?" He ran to the front door. No one, but the peephole was fogged up, as if someone had been breathing on it from the outside. On the fourth night, the voice whispered, "You've already spoken to me. That means you're mine now." Anton stopped answering, but the phone rang every night. 3:06 a.m., 3 rings, then silence. He tried throwing it away, breaking it, burning it, but each morning, the phone would be back on the nightstand, cold and untouched. Years later, someone found the phone in the same apartment. The receiver left off the hook, and if you picked it up, "Can you hear me?" Igor moved into an old communal apartment in the heart of the city. The building was pre-revolutionary, decrepit, with peeling walls and a musty smell that clung to his clothes. The room was cheap, too cheap. He was surprised, but the landlady explained simply, "It's an old house. People don't last here. The room is fine. Just don't touch the wardrobe. It's been here since the war. Everyone left it alone. You should too." The wardrobe stood in the corner, massive, almost reaching the ceiling, carved with faded wooden patterns that dust and time had turned into dark smudges. There were faint marks on its doors, like someone had touched them often with damp, sweaty hands. Igor just shrugged, probably just another superstition. That first night, he barely slept. Everything seemed quiet, but the room felt alive. The air trembled with tension, and then he heard it. Heavy, raspy breathing, like an old, sick man exhaling in the dark. The sound was coming from behind the wardrobe. Several days passed. Igor kept blaming it on fatigue, noisy neighbors, the age of the house. But the breathing didn't stop. It came only at night when everything else was silent. Each time he lay still, holding his breath, staring into the shadows and listening. Something was breathing, deeply, steadily, with a faint wheeze like infected lungs gasping for air. He couldn't take it anymore. One day when he was home alone, he made up his mind. He pushed the wardrobe aside. It resisted like it had grown into the floor. Behind it, a section of the wall looked different, darker, damper, and in the center, a tiny wooden hatch, held shut by a rusty latch. His heart pounded. Without thinking, he reached out and unhooked the latch. A cold, damp gust hit his face. It smelled of stale earth, mold, and something ancient. Behind the door was a narrow opening, like part of an old ventilation shaft, but without any pipe, just black emptiness. And from that void, Igor felt something watching him. Not eyes exactly, something deeper. Attention, presence. He slammed the hatch shut and shoved the wardrobe back in place, gasping for breath. But it was too late. He had woken something up. Someone was standing next to him, lips parting ever so slightly, breathing in and out, slowly, audibly. Sometimes it would stop, holding still, like the thing was listening to him. Late at night, the floor creaked in the kitchen. Not under his feet, behind him, as if someone was walking. Heavy, deliberate. Igor couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled the wardrobe aside again and yelled into the darkness. "Who are you? What do you want?" The reply, inhale, exhale, inhale, then silence. The next morning he woke with the disturbing sense that someone had stood beside him all night. The wardrobe had moved on its own, now standing at an angle. like something had pushed it. On the dusty floor near his bed were footprints, bare, dirty, and old. The kind that left damp, dark marks. Igor left, fled, really. In the middle of the night, suitcase in hand, not even bothering to close the hatch. He never answered the landlady's calls again. Since then, many others have rented the room, but they all say the same thing. The wardrobe, it moves by itself, and at night someone breathes, especially when you're sure you're alone.